Well, you're number one for hip hop and R&B, and the station that puts on for the poet. It's your homie CJ the DJ, and right now checking in with me, I have Senator Cory Booker. Happy New Year to you.
Oh, thank you. Happy New Year to you. It's so good to be on, man. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for taking the time, man. So I want to jump right into it. You know, last year, a lot of people who thought that they understood the framework of U.S. politics kind of got thrown for a loop. I mean, even now, you know, stimulus checks and how much we as citizens receive has been a big topic, and it shed light on how things actually operate. A lot of people thought that, you know, it was all in the hands of the president. A lot of people came to learn not so much. So with you actually being a senator, can you please explain, like in simple layman's terms, how the Senate actually works?
Yes, I'm so glad, because I think a lot of folks, we think, oh, well, let's elect the president, but we don't realize we have three equal branches of government. So you may win the White House, like Georgia enabled Joe Biden to win, but he can't get much done if he does not have the ability to pass things through the Senate. And the Senate right now is controlled by a guy named Mitch McConnell. He calls himself, I would never speak in a pejorative way, he calls himself the Grim Reaper, because he takes pride on killing bills, even bipartisan bills that come out of the House of Representatives. And so for those of us who believe in a time of crisis like right now, a pandemic, an economic decline like we haven't seen since the Great Depression, and think the government should be acting, folks should know that we saw a government act. The House of Representatives 6 months ago passed a major bill that would have brought stimulus to people, $1,200 checks, $2,000 checks. They keep acting to try to help people, but Mitch McConnell keeps stopping it. And that's why right now Georgia has a chance to deliver a blow for the cause of change. They already helped us to get a new president elected, but now they will determine whether Mitch McConnell controls the United States Senate or Democrats control the United States Senate. And that's why this election in Georgia, everybody in America is looking towards what's happening in Georgia, or frankly is going to be dependent upon what happens in Georgia. Because a lot of the issues that Joe Biden campaigned on to do big things around raising earnings for Americans, from the minimum wage, frankly, to giving middle-class Americans a major tax break, all the way to free college education, to more money for people who want to start businesses and more. These big ideas that he had, he won't be able to get them done if we don't change the Senate. And so if you're in your great state, you really have a chance to determine which way our country goes, in whether you come out and vote for Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff or not.
Definitely. You know, I know right now a lot of people looking at Georgia, and I want to throw a shout out to my city, man. Savannah's been very energetic, very hands-on. A lot of people have been taking advantage of early voting and getting out, and a lot of people want to see Reverend Raphael Warnock win. You know, he's right here from the city, and if he wins, he would be the first black senator for the state of Georgia, which is big. So I want to, you know, ask you, as the first black senator for the state of New Jersey, and given like the rise in racial tension over the past year or so, do you feel like there's a certain pressure for African-American politicians, especially those who are the first to come into their position?
Well, let me just tell you right now, there's been over 2,000 people to serve in the United States Senate, and only about 10 of them have been black. Barack Obama was the third popularly elected African-American to the Senate. I was the fourth. And when I got here, I saw how this institution that has so much power had so much lack of representation. And I'm not just talking about as senators, but even a lot of the big committees didn't even have African American people working on them. And so I started having good conversations with people in the Democratic Party, saying we've got to make sure that the people who are working on big issues, who are in the room when it happens, should reflect the diversity of our country. And we made a difference, and have a lot more African Americans hired here in the Senate. And so I know what one person can do to make change. And I also have known Raphael Warnock for over 10 years. If he comes to the United States Senate, I am telling you right now, he will change this institution on day one, because there has never been someone with his background. This man is an educated man. He's got more degrees in the month of July. This brother is a sitting pastor of one of our most historic churches in all of America, Martin Luther King's family's church. He is a soulful man with a keen intellect who has dedicated his whole life to serving people. And as we know from those of us who grew up in the church, we know that he is organized around, as Matthew 25 says, helping the least of these. So I cannot tell you how excited I am personally about a Raphael Warnock and how much professionally I know that him and John Ossoff will make a difference for Georgians, whether you are upset that a rural hospital in Georgia has closed or frustrated that your child can't afford college, not to mention that child care is so expensive. These are two men who will make a difference for you.
I recently heard a statistic that said far fewer black men vote than black women. Now, I know we live in a day and an age where, you can't believe everything you hear. You got to fact check. But I want to ask, is that true? And if so, why do you think that is?
Well, let's just be clear. It's not just black men that black women are voting more than. No one in America, no demographic, votes at higher rates than black women do. So let's just say that white women, white men, the highest voting demographic in the Democratic Party, as we've seen in past elections, are black women. Loyal, dedicated, strong, determined. They are change makers. They've been from the days of Sojourner Truth, Ella Baker, Mary McLeod Bethune. There's a strong tradition of changing America, that black women have been really the most dependable social justice agents when it comes to fueling our democracy with voting. Now, where black men stand, I want to be clear, relative to a lot of other demographics in this country, we're no worse off. Let's not beat up on black men. But I will tell you this, fellas, we got to stand up and do more, because this is an election, as we saw around this country. We saw congressional races be determined. I'm not exaggerating. One in Iowa was determined by 6 votes. We saw in some determined by about a dozen votes. And so what you do over the next few days leading into Tuesday, which is the last day you can vote, what you do is could determine the destiny of this country. And we know that in America, especially as it pertains to African Americans, change doesn't just happen. You got to make it happen. As Frederick Douglass says, a great black man, a great American period, said that if there is no struggle, there is no progress. And often, the thing that hurts us the most is not just what people do to us, but our inability to stand up and fight back or fight for us. And so all I have to say for black men is not to let anybody beat down on us, look down on us, discourage us, or point fingers at us, but for us to go back to the core of our community, which has always been, whether it's the labor movement, whether it's the suffrage movement, whether it is the civil rights movement, African Americans have been a central part of every movement for social justice. When we participate, when we vote, America changes for the better.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like every time there's a major election, politicians look towards the African American community to show up and shift the pendulum with votes. But when one of us gets killed by an officer, we can't get any convictions. Or when we talk about systemic racism, there are those who like to act like it doesn't exist. Or even when we talk about the racial wealth gap in America, which is something I've heard you say played a role in your life and how your father raised you.
Yeah, man. I mean, this is what I know in my life, and I don't care who you are in America. You have probably could say the same thing, especially if you're black, that I know that I'm here because of this sense of collective struggle. My dad was born to a single mother in the mountains of North Carolina. In fact, he was born poor, but he would heckle me if I ever called him poor. He goes, "Boy, don't tell people I was poor. I was just P-O. I couldn't afford the other 2 letters." And he should have been a statistic. But he tells me first and foremost, when his mama couldn't take care of him, was the love of a community. People took him into his home that are now my family. The Pilgrims took him into their home and helped to raise him. And then when he couldn't go to college, couldn't afford it, never happened in his family, it was a black church that took a collection to give him enough money to go to North Carolina Central University, HBCU, right there in North Carolina. And then when he graduated, he happened to move to Washington, D.C., right during the 60s, and it was groups like the Urban League and other civil rights groups that were putting pressure on corporations to hire their first black people in the professional ranks. And my dad became IBM's first black salesman in the entire Virginia area. And when you let qualified people to the table to compete fairly, my dad thrived. He became one of their best global salesmen, made their gold circle of salesmen, got promoted up to New Jersey, to New York, to Madison Avenue, and one of their premier offices, tried to move into homes with great neighborhoods with great public schools, but kept getting turned away. And eventually, again, it was people, activists, who came together and set up a sting operation where they eventually had a white couple pose as them in order to buy the house that I grew up in as a child. And that's why my daddy looked at me and said, boy, don't you ever walk around this house like you hit a triple. You were born on third base. And other folk got you here. You can never pay them back, but you got to pay it forward. And so my life, as should the lives of all of us, need to understand that we are here, grown from soil that was watered with blood, sweat, and tears of our ancestors. And the work must continue because too much is on the line. Too many people, as you talked about the wealth gap, we live in a nation right now where Black Americans have a dime for every dollar that white Americans have in general. And we have seen up until the 1970s that there were systematic legal means with which African Americans were denied pathways towards wealth creation that were afforded white Americans. From the Homestead Act, which gave millions of acres, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of acres of land to immigrants and others, blacks excluded, whether it was FHA loans to buy houses that would actually increase in value. And so we have to do what we can to balance the scales of justice and expand opportunity, not just for Black people. McKinsey, this fancy consulting firm, did a study and said, if we close the Black-white wealth gap in America, it would mean our overall economy would increase from $1 to $1.5 trillion. That's how much more money would be circulating through our economy, helping all Americans. But in order to do this, we need real policy changes. To change policy, we must win elections. And that's why I don't think I've ever seen in my life a moment like this where you have one state can decide which policy path a nation takes. One towards progressive policy change to create more wealth, opportunity, and abundance, or one towards gridlock where nothing gets done, even at a time in a pandemic when so many people need help.
Right. I mean, as somebody born and raised from Savannah, it's crazy to think that a lot of what happens to the country following 2020 all depends on the state of Georgia.
I know, look, my mom and dad lived in Georgia from the time I was in law school in the 90s to the time I became a United States Senator in 2013. They lived in Atlanta, Ashford Dunwoody to be exact. I spent Christmases, Thanksgivings, parents' birthdays. Georgia is in my blood. It's 20 years of being there and visiting my family there. And I know the people of Georgia, and I know the Black community in Georgia, and I know the heralded traditions that you all have. And I know that every election time people tell you, oh, come out and vote. And often things don't change to the degree that we want them to change. But there's something that's happened in 2020. The consciousness of our country, the institutional racism has grown. Me and Kamala Harris wrote a bill on justice and policing, for example, that just a year earlier would have probably gotten 5 senators to sign on to it. We got darn near 50. And then you add to that the understanding of the wealth disparities that has grown as an economy is struggling. It's recovered for some already, but others it's gotten worse. This has expanded our empathy as a nation and our moral imagination. We can make change now with Raphael Warnock and make change now with John Ossoff. If they come and give us that slight majority in the Senate, the time is ripe for real change in America. And we can't do it in New Jersey, my home state that I represent. We can't do it in Washington, D.C., the city I was born in. The only people that have the power is Georgia voters. And to have power and not use it is a sin upon your ancestors. And what I am asking everyone to do is to use your power now more than ever, to use your power in Georgia, and we will see change materially in our lives if we do that. If we don't, we are complicit in our own undoing. And so I pray everyone will go out to vote. And I want to say, you can find out more information if you just go to georgiademocrat.org/vote to get information about how you can vote. If you have an absentee ballot, don't put it in mail. Put it in a drop box. And all this information you can find at that website, georgiademocrat.org. You have the power. Use the power. If it's not for yourself, use it for somebody else who's struggling right now and needs this change.
That's Senator Cory Booker, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, I definitely appreciate you taking the time to call in and talk to us down here in Georgia, as well as all the good folks in Savannah and the Coastal Empire.
Listen, you fire me up. I hope when this pandemic's over, you let me come down to Savannah and see you in person, all right?
Definitely. Hey, it's your homie CJ the DJ. Make sure y'all keep it tuned in with me on the station that puts on for the Pope, 94.1 The Beat.